Well, we've got a big crisis in our country these days, and it's not the political divide or the economy or the border or inflation or even sexual norms, as serious as they are. It's a spiritual problem, primarily expressing itself in the denial of the existence of the God of the Bible. I call it modern day atheism, and in all of its forms, it is real and alive, and it's deadly. When John Harvard was involved in founding Harvard University in 1636, they declared that theology was the queen of the sciences and sits at the top of the list of classes and subjects that you could study. If you scroll through Harvard University these days, if you're a student there and you want to find out about historic Christianity, the closest you can come is somewhere in the religion department. There is a class called Comparative Religions. And in that class, there are a couple days spent on historic Christianity in the midst of all of this craziness that Harvard University offers as university classes. Did you know that sociologists tell us that 80% of our kids between 13 and 17 don't believe in the God of historic Christianity? And wait until our universities get a hold of them. They'll do a deep dive into non-belief. We are at war with atheism in our culture today. Atheism, without, theo or theism, God, without God. It's a form of agnosticism, without knowledge, without the knowledge of God. Atheism and agnosticism reject the belief in the existence of God. They say that God hasn't done a very good job of revealing himself to us, that we lack sufficient evidence, so there is no God. And atheism and agnosticism are the prevailing belief systems of our time. And these systems reject the existence of the God of the Bible. They're the greatest threat to the disintegration of our culture and our way of life. The defining mark of the founding of America was not democracy or liberty as great as they are. It's spiritual. It's spiritual. There was a faith in the God, in the existence of the God of the Bible, that everything else flowed out of this belief system. And so I want to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that the God of the Bible does exist and that he loves us and he cares for us and he's in control of your life and mine, and how we can share that belief with our friends and our family and those people we work with. But I hear you, all of a sudden you're saying, wait a minute, I already believe in the existence of God. Yet I found that if I ask most Christians, how do you know God exists? They would say, well, I just believe, I just have faith. Unfortunately, that answer is no longer good enough to deal with the forces and the war we're in our culture. We have to get to the root of belief. We have to get to the why question. Why do we believe? How do we know God exists? How can we know that evidence that God exists? Which is why Paul makes a beeline to this question in chapter 1 of his manifesto, his great work on Romans, chapter 1. Don't dial this out. Hang with me for a couple minutes. Look at what Paul says in Romans chapter 1, verse 19. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Did you catch what Paul's saying here? This is the essence, the critical essence of the war that we're at with our culture today. He's saying, since the beginning of time, since the beginning of creation, God clearly revealed himself in what has been made in the world around us, that he has not left his existence to be buried or hidden, but he has made himself known to all people. And because God is the teacher, we can't say that we didn't learn, because we have a bad teacher. No, we have the greatest teacher. Our teacher is God. So what he has taught us, because we have failed to receive it, we find ourselves therefore in what he has taught us to be without excuse. Well, what has he revealed? He's revealed his invisible qualities, his attributes, his eternal power, his self-existence, his omnipotence, his divine nature, his holiness, omniscience, righteousness, his sovereignty. All of this is clearly seen from what has been made. The problem is not that we don't know that God exists. The problem is that we don't want to know that God exists. We want to be in charge. I'm the king around here. I don't need someone telling me who I am and where I came from and how to behave. But the problem with this kind of thinking is it takes away the existence of God in our lives and our culture. And that's big trouble. That's why Paul says, let me ask you a question. And it's a question I'm going to ask you to answer. I have a question for you and your friends, and this question is powerful and it's compelling. Question: how do you explain the origin of your life and our world and the universe? I mean, just take a second. Look outside for a second, and you'll conclude that something exists. You'll see the sun, the sky, the trees, the grass, people. Now, the moment that we acknowledge that something exists, the question becomes, where did it all come from? What was its origin? Who or what caused everything to exist in the first place? This is a different question than the question that science asks. Science asks, what happened with what's already here? How do the things that already exist fit together? How are they related? How do they work? But the question we're asking is different. We're asking the question of origins. If something exists, something must have caused it. And we want to know what that something was. Now, the popular answer is that the universe never had a beginning. It just always existed. That the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be. It started from nothing. Some scientists say that even in its starting from nothing, the universe came into being with a sudden cataclysmic event called the Big Bang theory, a chance collision of floating energy and matter that set in motion a random series of events that over billions of years brought us to the complex state that we find ourselves in today. But the problem with science, the problem that science can't adequately explain, is the most obvious and simple of questions. It's the question of origins. Where did the original matter and energy of the universe come from in the first place? Who or what was the first cause? I tell the story of meeting with a Westinghouse nuclear scientist when I was a teenage student youth minister. And he said to me, we don't really need your Christian faith as a crutch. He said, we've figured out as scientists that the universe started as a tiny ball of matter and energy the size of a peanut that's expanding, and one day it will collapse in on itself and end up the size of a peanut once again. So we don't need the crutch of your Christian faith. And I said, well, I do have one small question that I would like to ask you, and that's this. Where did the peanut come from? Where did the original matter and energy of the universe come from? It's the question of origins. I love what astrophysicist Robert Jastrow, who was the director of NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies, wrote. He wrote this: now we see how the astronomical evidence supports the biblical view of the origin of the world. Consider the enormity of the problem. Science has proven that the universe exploded into being at a certain moment. It asks, what cause produced this effect? Who or what put the matter or energy into the universe? A sound explanation may exist for the explosive birth of the universe, but if it does, science cannot find out what the explanation is. The scientist's pursuit of the past ends at the moment of creation. For the scientist who has lived by faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of knowledge. He is about to conquer its highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been there for centuries. Science answers the question, how does everything work? How does it all fit together? But it's never been able to answer the question of origins. Where did the original stuff of the universe come from in the first place? A question which the Bible is more than happy to answer in Book 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1. That's why this question is so important. It's the key to understanding all of life and all of culture. And when you get it wrong, everything breaks down and disintegrates. So the Bible answers in chapter 1, verse 1, book 1, it says these words. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And here's the kicker. All people know this truth, Paul says. Since the creation of the world, God's existence has been plain. His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly known in the world around us, leaving all people without excuse. The psalmist writes in chapter 19, verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. After I graduated from high school as a non-believing high school kid, just having a good time, I went out to a Young Life ranch in Colorado in Buena Vista on the side of Mount Princeton. And I remember the day they took us about 3 days into the trip up the side of Mount Princeton up to where we could see 54 peaks of the great Colorado Rockies. They called it the Big Sky Country, the Great Adventure. Man, it was unbelievable. I had never seen anything like this. 360 degrees around me of snow-covered mountain peaks. It was big. It was massive. It was powerful. And then our leader asked us a question. So, where do you think all this came from? Good question. I didn't have an answer. I didn't. Take a look around, I remember him saying. Where did all of this come from? He was asking that simple question of origins. It's a powerful, rational, logical, compelling argument for the existence of an all-powerful creator God. It really got me thinking, where did all of this come from? From the complexity of the human eye, to the wonder of the human brain, to the DNA cells inside of us, to the expanse of the universe. Who or what caused all that is? Now, the agnostic, the atheist, they have no answer to the simplest of all questions. It feels like an absurd leap of faith to place the explanation of the origins of all that is of our world to random chance. Much more faith is required to attribute the wonders of our world to the chance collision of floating gases and matter than to accept the existence of an eternal, intelligent, all-powerful God. I mean, the greater probability is that there is an eternal, all-powerful, intelligent creator capable of making everything that we see around us in our universe, with not only matter and energy, but also the really tough stuff. How do you explain the creation of personality and love and joy and of language? I mean, the next time that you hold a little baby in your arms, ask the question, accident or created by an intelligent God? I've done a lot of baptisms in my lifetime as a minister. And when I do, I wonder who could but rejoice at so great a gift from the hand of God to our lives as the miracle of a little child. I mean, what about it, moms? Do you buy the line that that little miracle is nothing more than a grown-up germ, the product of a chance collision of floating clouds of matter and energy? Christianity counters that the only reasonable explanation for the origin of our universe and all that is an eternal creator God. And this God isn't some mindless leap of faith. The far greater leap of faith is to think our world came about as a result of a chance explosion of matter and gases. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't a Big Bang theory. I'm still asking for the question of, if there was, where did that Big Bang come from, the stuff that went bang? Did it come somewhere deep in space billions of years ago that nobody can really explain or know where it came from? I mean, look at the evidence around us of an intelligent creator God. The good news is that there's an all-powerful creator God who wants to have a personal relationship with you and me. Not only created the world, he is highly relational. He loves us beyond our imagination. He can tell us who we are and where we came from and where we're headed and how to handle the difficulties in our lives and why we exist. And he wants us to live with a whole, fulfilled, joyful life. He really does if we believe in his existence, know why he exists, and follow his ways. The ultimate problem of our culture today is modern day theism, that there is no God. And I can tell you, friends, it's only when our country and our nation and our people, one life at a time, return to our original beliefs that we will be able to make sense of our culture, our country, and your life and mine. As crazy as the things are that are going on around us, it's only when we return to this Genesis book 1, chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we submit ourselves to that power and that life in our lives. Not only does God exist, but he's revealed himself. This is what I want to talk about in the next couple of messages. He's revealed himself. He has spoken in his word, and he has visited planet Earth in his Son, Jesus, to tell us and to show us how much he loves us and how much we matter to him. We don't have to rely on atheism or agnosticism. Now, how can we convince our world? I'll tell you what, get educated. We're at war. We're at war. Get educated. I love the book that I first read, Paul Little's Know Why You Believe. Get it, order it on Amazon, read it. Lee Strobel got tons of stuff out today. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason or the defense for the hope that you have within you. So don't be afraid of direct conversation. Get educated, get knowledgeable, know the basic facts. And the simplest question to ask people is don't be afraid of the direct conversation of the question of origin. So, by the way, with all that's going on around us these days, so where do you think everything came from in the first place? It's a compelling, powerful question to bring people to a knowledge of who God is. And let's pray for our country that it returns to our original beliefs, to the existence of the God of the Bible in our schools, in our universities, and in our cultures. And if you need more help, call us or contact us or write us. We are here to help you at Consequential Christianity. We want all people to understand all of life from God's perspective. God bless you. Amen.